Welcome. On behalf of the Board of Directors for the EMS ISD Education Foundation, we want to welcome you to the presentation portion of today's event. The following professionals are recognized as a woman of influence in our community. Please direct your attention to our first recipient, who has helped to bring physical structure to the learning environments for EMS ISD as a principal architect for VLK Architects, Mrs. Lisa Vardaman.
I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. My dad was a first-generation graduate of college, and he was a mechanical engineer responsible for designing fighter planes. When I was a little girl, every time a plane would fly over our house, I believed that it was because my dad designed it, and I found that very interesting. My mom was a homemaker, and she was an extraordinary homemaker. She was a great cook. She had an immaculate house. She was a wonderful hostess. She canned her own vegetables, and she sewed all my clothes as long as I can remember. She was incredible. I consider myself a very good student. My mother gave me a lot of guidance in that she made us really very independent. She gave us loose boundaries and really made us realize the importance of the decisions that we made. So in everything that I did, I always wanted to make sure that I was making my mother proud of me. When I was 12, I realized that I wanted to go into drafting and that I wanted to have a field that was associated with doing some sort of drafting or designing instructions for folks to build things. I ended up going to Texas A&M about a decade after they started letting women go to school there. Little did I realize the challenges that were going to be associated with my gender when I did it. I was completely oblivious to the fact that this was such a male-dominated field. So I graduated from college and I came back to Fort Worth and I married my high school sweetheart, and we had 2 boys. I went to work for the largest architecture firm in Fort Worth at the time, and I was only the second woman in architecture, so it was pretty interesting. And so I took on, a lot of challenges and was really blessed with being given a lot of opportunity to do a lot of really interesting projects. The projects that really spoke to me were education projects, and I think it was because, I could really relate to it. I really loved the fact that I could imagine solutions that supported student success and supported communities, because I really do feel like schools are the anchor of our communities. And so because of that, my love of designing educational projects led me to work at VLK. And gosh, I don't even know how many schools I've probably been involved with. I mean, it's countless, but I've had the pleasure of working in communities all across North Texas, and through the growth of our firm, I've had the pleasure of working in a lot of school districts throughout Texas, and so really getting to see the differences and the distinctions between communities, but really the root is mostly the same, that educators really have a heart for teaching and they really have a passion for learning, and so that really united very well with my desire to build those types of spaces.
Our next recipient is a professional educator, touching the lives of students, teachers, and staff for decades. EMS ISD Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Linda Parker.
I grew up in very rural West Texas, in a very small town called Roaring Springs. I am the youngest of 9 children of a yours, mine, and ours family. And I love to think back on my childhood. I was always a strong student. I actually skipped 3rd grade and moved up to 4th grade. I cheerleaded in high school and ran track, threw discus, which is so funny because I'm terrible at that, but I had a really good time. One of the neat things, that, like I said, when I was in 7th grade, I always was very sociable, and had a coach who was stressing, was actually the head coach, and he was stressing about the fact that he had to organize the concession stand for basketball. So being Linda Parker, at that time Linda Palmer, I said, let me do that for you. So I organized all the concession stand for all varsity and JV games in 7th grade and 8th grade. I got the workers, I organized the money, I set it up. I loved it. It was my work. And then I got to stay at the school, watch the game, be a part of that. So I think some leadership development there was really important. So married at 17, trying to finish up college, surprise, we had Tara. And then as I'm finishing up student teaching in that final year of school, I graduate from college, and 2 weeks later have Erica, our second child. 5 years later, we were blessed with our third daughter, Lisa, and those 3 daughters have blessed me with 7 grandchildren. My husband was a coach. He was an incredible support and continues to be an incredible support for me. So I kept asking my own husband, you need to be a principal. You need to be a principal. Finally, he goes, I love my job. Why don't you be a principal? I was like, I think I will. Okay, let's do this. And I went after started pursuing my master's. I thought a lot about my person of influence, and my mom kept coming to mind. She was so strong, such a strong woman. People who knew her loved her. They knew she stood strong in her beliefs, that she stood strong in her love of family. She was a fighter, but a fighter for the good things. I watched her serve on the school board. She served on the city council. She was a giver to her community in such a positive way. Serving our community is critical. In work, I just feel like it comes naturally. When I was a principal, we served our communities there to the best of our ability and included them in that culture of the campus. At the district level, I just think it's so critical to have community involvement. And if we as leaders aren't being that role model for others, especially in a time when people don't really like to volunteer, they don't want to be always a part of something organized, it becomes critical to be the role model for that.
Hear from our next recipient, someone that has secured health and wellness to our community through Be Well Primary Care's medical clinic, Dr. Radhika Vayani.
So I was born in Lima, Ohio, which is a really small city in Ohio. Moved to Texas when I was about 5. So it was a little bit difficult. I got bullied a lot in elementary school, but I found one friend named Kate. She pretty much saved me. So we became best friends through high school, and that's what I tell my kids now, you just need that one person. So what drew me to medicine? For me, it was that classic, as a child, that's all I ever wanted to be kind of thing. Growing up, all I did was play with dolls and then pretend that they were sick and then pretend to fix them. Later on, as a child, I do remember seeing a pediatrician and something about, I think I had strep throat, and he was super mean. And at that point, I was just like, wow. I need to be better than this. And then as I grew older in high school, I volunteered a lot at hospitals, and I would, just go around delivering flowers or filling up water jugs or playing with the kids on the oncology floor. And so that pretty much made it for sure. Okay, so as a mom and a wife and a doctor, it's a tough balance to make happen. With all the hardships of residency in med school and going, I would 100% do it all over again. To me, every other career is just as important, but medicine, just the way you truly impact a person's life, I don't think there's anything quite like it. Some days are harder than others, and there's days where I feel like, I've had enough of this, but then that patient will tell me, oh my gosh, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. And so that brings it all back. And every day there's a reminder like that of why I chose medicine. The most influential woman in my life is my mom, Bharati Puganti. Her life was so different than mine. And just thinking about what she went through, I don't know if I could ever do that. So she was born in India. She got married at 15. Back in India in those days, it was about arranged marriages, so you didn't really meet your husband. It was more about falling in love after you got married. So she got married at 15. Today, they've been married for 57 years, and they're perfect for each other. So yeah, she learned how to speak English within a year. She worked in an assembly warehouse, putting little mechanic parts together. When they opened up video stores, she took care of the payroll, hiring employees, inventory, all the accounting, finances, all of that. And she's raised two pretty okay kids. And no, I mean, the junior version of that, it's funny to say, but my other biggest influence of a woman is my daughter. She's smart, she's beautiful, she is so confident, and she, I feel like, makes me a stronger woman every day.
Our next recipient is recognized for her philanthropic commitment, Ms. Karen Fuller, Executive Director of Community Link Mission.
I was born in Brownwood, Texas. My parents were students at Howard Payne University and just grew up loving to learn. I was in the band, played French horn, was in a cappella choir, sang tenor. And I know I learned leadership during those times, but I mostly had fun. And I was really interested in this guy who was third chair at French horn, who was a couple of years older than me, and it was already a thing. So, loved high school, every minute of it. Juggling my life, when I look back on it, it is such a blur. I don't know how I did it. We had a son, we adopted a daughter, kids were in every sport, church activities, we did PTA, room mom. I volunteered, did junior league, did everything in the world. I don't know how. When I look at young moms nowadays, sometimes they look so tired, and I look in their eyes and go, yep, I remember. I remember those days. There have been so many influential women in my life, but mostly it was my mom. She was strong and tough and stubborn and resilient, and she always just modeled for us, what do you mean you can't do it? Of course you can. You can do anything. You can change the world. And that's just how I grew up, believing that, well, okay, let's just do this thing. I've been at Community Link since July of 2008, and our heart was always to give food, of course, but to help them get beyond needing us. So this year already, we've served over 2 million pounds of food with, I believe, 26,000 families. We've had 4,500 families go through case management, which that is to get them anything they need other than food, and about 1,500 in our counseling program to deal with root issues, such as generational poverty, just whatever's there that keeps them from getting on their feet. I think one thing I would like to say to anyone who is interested in serving their community is don't have preconceived notions. I had no idea that I would be at Community Link. Went to graduate school in psychology, was in private practice for a lot of years, done a lot of different things. I had no idea whatsoever I would be where I am. You don't know where the road will take you. So what you do is you just take, one step in front of the other, and you just go through the next open door.
Our final recipient is a professional lawmaker whose record for public education support of EMS is unparalleled. Senator Beverly Powell.
I grew up in a very close-knit family of 5. My mom was a teacher growing up, and my dad began his career out of World War II in the defense industry at what is now known as Lockheed Martin. My mother was the most influential person in my life, and that her mother, Georgia Emma Hogan, was the most influential woman in her life, and probably the second in mine. We kind of had that father knows best family where My dad was really dedicated to his work, and my mom was dedicated to being a school teacher and a homemaker. And of course, we were at every Friday night football game. I got married right out of high school and started my family. Later on, went back to school again to get an MBA from Texas Wesleyan University. One of the things that I'm most proud of that I do now is I sit on the board of the Burleson Higher Education Opportunity Fund. And we provide around 140 to 150 scholarships a year. When the opportunity came up for me to be appointed to the school board in Burleson, I said, I think I can do that. And so I spent 10 years as a school board trustee for Burleson ISD. And then at the end of that 10 years, I thought, well, what is next? And it turns out that the Texas State Senate was the next thing. I think of all the things that I'm really proud of as a Texas State Senator, meeting constituent needs was the single greatest thing that we've done. And to the very last person on my staff, every single one of my staff members has dedicated themselves wholly to making sure that we got people's needs met. I decided that for the last few months of my term in office that I would become involved in a project that I believe is probably going to be one of the most meaningful things that I've ever done. I sit on the Uvalde CISD Moving Forward Foundation, which is a group of Texas leaders who are profoundly committed to ensuring that the children of Robb Elementary get a new elementary school. We are well into the design process, and it is the most compassionate, empathetic design process that I've ever been involved in. I built probably $250 million worth of schools in Burleson. As a school board trustee, I was involved in those projects. But they pale in comparison to what the folks in Uvalde are experiencing right now. The depth of their grief is still very great, but their gratitude and their hope for better days tomorrow are going to carry them across the threshold.
Thank you for meeting 5 phenomenal role models and the 2022 Women of Influence recipients. Give them a round of applause.